Good evening. My name is Melinda L. Johnson, and I am the Director for Community Engagement and Advocacy with the YWCA Hartford region. On behalf of the YW, I would like to thank you all for joining us for the final night of our Equity Isn't a Game Women and Girls in Sports Listening Session series. Recently, we have heard the testimonies of Simone Biles, Sha'Carri Richardson, and Serena Williams speak to the inequities women in sports face and the parallel mental health challenges they compete with daily. So tonight, we will be exploring the experiences of girls in sports from the Hartford region and beyond. Prior to this event, you all were encouraged to complete a survey telling your own stories of inequitable experiences you have encountered in the sports industry. If you have not done so yet, we encourage you to click the link that's being placed in the chat and share with us. Because the purpose of this series is to listen. Using the survey, we, the YWCA Hartford Region Department of Community Engagement and Advocacy, will be listening to your experiences to evaluate opportunities for advocacy and action to achieve equity for women and girls in the sports industry. And during our time together, it is our hope that you would listen to the leaders in the industry discuss the challenges they have faced and the tools they have used to address these challenges. So when we think about girls in sports, there's a lot to consider. And while we right now have named already just a few phenomenal women who are rocking the sports world, these women were girls once upon a time. And there are many stigmas surrounding women and girls in sports. And this next video points out just a few ways that women are dealing with these things and girls are meeting these challenges to overcome gender-based challenges and layered inequities in the industry. Check this out.
When I was growing up, girls just didn't run in public.
No one on my all-boys team would pass to me.
Dad told me I couldn't be a boxer. He said I was too small.
There was a guy who tried to spit on me and then push me out of his way.
There comes a point where you have to be sure of yourself. People aren't used to women being so passionate. It scares them.
One day, I just said it doesn't matter what other people think.
I'm a fashion model who can dunk.
I'm a girl. That doesn't mean I have to wear a skirt.
Doesn't mean I can't get all fired up. They used to say that girl is crazy.
But then I just kept winning.
I didn't set out to dominate. I just did.
Somebody's got to be the best. So why not me?
I'm 55 years old and I run close to 70 miles a week.
I never felt like quitting.
There's something telling me to do it every single day. Just want to play ball.
So what we just saw from that very brief snippet of a Nike commercial is the kind of grit that it takes for girls and women to meet the challenge on a daily basis of performing within the sports industry. And it's not just the experiences that have lent themselves to this series that have allowed us to really see what it is that women and girls have been experiencing, but it's also the statistics. There's evidence, there's facts behind this. And with us this evening, as our first guest speaker, we have an individual that will be sharing with us some of the stats, statistics, and work that is being done to face these inequities. Erin Pellegrino is the Vice President of Community Impact at Women's Sports Foundation, where she uses her 20 years of experience in the sports and entertainment industry to help girls and women unlock their highest potential through sports. The Women's Sports Foundation was established in 1974 to advance the lives of women and girls through sports and physical activity. Their mission is to enable all girls and women to reach their potential in sports and life by providing financial fuel to aspiring champion athletes, funding groundbreaking research, providing education on women in sports, and advocating for equity on all playing fields. As a former three-sport athlete and NCAA men's assistant football coach, Pellegrino first realized the power of sports to create change at the New York Giants where she spent 4 years in the public relations department, cultivating her writing and media relations skills. She spent the next 8 years at the National Football League, learning from some of the brightest minds in the business, and later to join the fun-loving and mission-driven team at Sesame Street. Pellegrino spent the last 5 years launching and growing RISE, R-I-S-E, which is an award-winning nonprofit that uses sports to improve race relations. Erin, we are so glad to have you with us today to share the amazing work that's going on at Women's Sports Foundation, and the work that they're doing that is coming alive through data and statistics, and what it illustrates that's going on with women and girls in sports. And we want to welcome you to share this information with us at this time, and encourage our participants, if you have any questions that are brewing in your heart as we go along in this conversation, feel free to use the Q&A feature, that question answer feature right down there at the bottom, to get your questions out so that we can get a deep dive and a look at what's really going on when it comes to girls in sports. Erin, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you for that awesome introduction, as well as for sharing that video. I definitely got a lump in my throat watching that, just thinking about how far we've come in girls and women's sports, but also still how far we have to go. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and share a little bit more about my journey, although Melinda summed that up really well. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have about that experience and the transformative role that sports has played in my role personally, as well as professionally. And then, as she said, I really want to dig into the great work that we're doing at the Women's Sports Foundation, and particularly to highlight a program that we have with ESPNW that I think is a really good way to look at some of the important work we're doing with partners to make sure that future girls reach their highest potential in sports and in life. So as Melinda said, I was a 3-sport athlete growing up. I was the first girl and the youngest in a big family full of boys who loved to play sports. And at the time, I didn't realize how unique it was that my father encouraged me to go out and get messy and play with my brothers and really compete. From an early age, I was taught that it was a great thing to be strong and competitive. And that's a message that I'm so grateful for now. And I hope that I can play a role in helping other girls embrace that too. As I grew up and played 3 sports all through high school, I also had the door of football opened up to me through one of my older brothers. When I was in high school, had the opportunity to start taking statistics in high school football, fell in love with the game, became a men's special teams coach for the University at Albany when I was a freshman in college, and the New York Giants had their training camp at the University at Albany. So by the time I was 19 as a sophomore, I was interning for the New York Giants, traveling with the team, working their games. It was a really amazing experience to work for them. I was the first female to hold my position with the New York Giants and also with the NFL. And I'm really proud of that now, but I think it's important to talk about too how challenging it was. I think anybody who's been one of the first at anything knows that that can be a really isolating and lonely, challenging experience at times. And you only get those doors open for you with allies in the majority. So I think that experience taught me a lot about being a minority in the room, what it takes to be a fellow ally to people in those situations. And it really gave me a different lens on sports as I moved forward in my career. When I moved over to the NFL, had the opportunity to do some amazing traveling. They were expanding their international business, spending 6-7 months a year on the road. Really had awesome opportunities. And the more I saw of the world, the more concerned I became with how much I was paying forward all of these amazing opportunities that I'd been given. And I really did some soul searching on that. I thought about what I wanted to do, and I wanted to learn how to use sports to give back. I wanted to understand nonprofit more. So took a sharp turn to Sesame Street for a couple of years, as Melinda mentioned, traveled the world with the Muppets and learned digital communications and nonprofit and fundraising. But sports is just, it's who I am. It's in my DNA. It's the language I speak best. So jumped at the chance to go to Rise and use sports to improve race relations. And then I came across Billie Jean King and the Women's Sports Foundation, and I just knew right away that these were my people, and I had to be a part of it. So the Women's Sports Foundation, as Melinda said, we were founded in 1974 by Billie Jean King with $5,000 of her own money, really with just a mission in her soul that she wanted to make sure that the path for girls and women that came behind her was less difficult than the own one that she had forged. And she wanted to use the business of sports to propel that. So she took that $5,000 prize money she got from a Bob Hope tournament out in California, and she turned it into what we are today, where next year, which is the 50th anniversary of Title IX, our goal is to reach $100 million, having given back to grassroots programs across the country to support girls and women in sports. And I'm extremely confident that we're going to reach that. So really proud of the work that we do there. As the Vice President of Community Impact, my role is really to oversee two main areas. I oversee our athlete programs. So that's all of our collegiate athletes, high school athletes, up to our elite Olympians and professional athletes, making sure that they have the programs and leadership they need to be effective ambassadors for us, and that we're being a great resource for them. And I oversee our community, our grant program. So everything we do to expand our reach at the grassroots level. And I mentioned at the top that includes Sports for Life, which is a fantastic program we launched with ESPNW in 2014. So we just finished up our 7th year of that. During that period, we've given away 309 grants at more than $1.7 million, helping more than 70,000 kids. And this program is really designed to increase participation and retention in sports development programs for African American, Hispanic, and Native American girls across the country. So we're trying to create leadership opportunities for these young women. We're trying to make sure that they play sports, that they stay involved in sports, that they see a future there, and that we're enhancing the programs that already exist. You pointed out, Melinda, at the top, we talked about the statistics and the research and what we've been finding. And the truth is that sports play a really pivotal role in helping girls succeed in life, whether that be a career or as an athlete in sports. It really doesn't matter. The skills that we learn as teammates, as athletes, people that learn to persevere and have confidence and bounce back, those skills help us be better people in all of the roles that we want. And just one example of that is we know that of all the women who are CEOs in the United States, 94% of them played sports. More than 60% of them played sports at the collegiate level. And that's not just CEOs in the sports industry, that's CEOs across every industry. And that's not to say, that you have to be a CEO to be successful, but I do think that's a really important point when you try to understand how those skills of being an athlete can help you succeed in other areas. Unfortunately, we know that all girls are less likely to play sports than boys. And we know that particularly happens when we talk about the BIPOC community, that girls arrive at sports later than boys. They're pushed out earlier than boys. Quite frankly, we know that organized sports were not designed with girls in mind. The language, the activities that are often used can be alienating for girls and their families. So we've been trying to take a really big look at what are those barriers keeping girls away, and what can we do to support it. And Sports for Life and the grant program is just one way that we try to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for giving such a robust description of what you all are endeavoring to do and what you all have been doing for going on 50 years now. That's exciting to have that huge marker ahead. So when you look at the inequities that women face on that level, and girls that are now newly being inducted into sports, and you look at how girls are coming into the space, you said something that's pivotal, and that's that traditional sports weren't created with women in mind. It wasn't designed around us. The language, the certain things about it weren't designed for us. What are the 3 paramount challenges that you feel are facing girls when they're first being introduced to sports?
Yeah, I mean, so 3 challenges that I would point to, I think, I mentioned for myself that messaging that I got early in life, that was transformative for me. And I see that in hindsight now. And I'm really hoping to open other parents, guardians, administrators' eyes to that as young girls are very malleable to those messages that we get. And when we're told from the beginning that it's great to be strong, it's great to be confident, it's great to compete, it's great to be the best versions of ourselves, I think that gave me and gives others the freedom to pursue that. That's one piece of it. I think another piece of it is the infrastructure. We have to make sure that these opportunities are here for all girls. In urban environments, we may have challenges. There may be safety, there may be transportation, there may not physically be the infrastructure to play. And that's part of what we're trying to get at with the financial resources of what we do. And then I think we need the role model piece of it. It's great for my dad to tell me to play and for my brothers to let me play, but when I can see Billie Jean King leading a visionary, someone who put that to practice, she often says, you have to see it in order to be it. And I really subscribe to that. I think we need women in these roles as coaches, as moms who show up and encourage their girls and show them that you can have careers like mine. You can be a community coach. There's so many different ways that you can get involved and role model that you're proud to be strong, you're proud to be athletic, you want that for the next generation, and you're willing to be a participant in that. I think those are the 3 areas that I would speak to the most.
Awesome. Along this journey so far in these conversations that we've had, we have covered women in sports leadership and talked about women like on the executive level. We've talked about semi-pro and professional sports. We've talked about college. So now when we're talking about girls, to really frame that, we're talking about, your high school, middle school, maybe just starting out in elementary school level. And there's a lot of development going on there, physically, psychologically, so many areas. So while you pointed to that, the research shows that, in the long run, participating in sports gives women an advantage in many areas and allows them to really thrive in a lot of areas. What are, you think, some of the psychological challenges that girls are faced with when it comes to participating sports, especially when we consider their development and where they are?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. Again, when we come back to the messaging, I think we see girls fall out of sports in record numbers in adolescence. And when we looked at why is that, some of it is the messages they're getting from their peers. They don't think it's attractive or cute to be super strong, or they're getting these messages that their friends don't want to exercise, they have different interests, or maybe it's new for their families that girls would be aggressive and competitive. So sometimes it's in there and trying to make sure that that's there. I think I talked a little bit about the barriers with transportation and making sure that there's the equipment and the resources that they need. I think sometimes girls, depending on the sports that they're in, we've seen a lot in recent times about the uniforms that they're wearing. Sometimes I think there are some sports where girls start to feel objectified, and especially if we're thinking about those key adolescent ages, I think that could be a huge deterrent for keeping girls away. And that idea of, where does this take me? If I can't see it, we know for sure right now that only 4% of the sports media landscape is dedicated to women's sports. So you may be aware that there's girls playing sports out there, but sometimes I don't think young girls can see a path of how this gets them from where they are to where they might go. Because what we see and what we think too is, we're trying to get to the championship, we're trying to get scholarships, but I think what I'm here to try to help girls understand too is that you don't have to be the MVP. You don't have to be a professional athlete to take away amazing things from sports. I talked about being a great teammate. I talked about how I got my start in the NFL being a statistician. So there's so many opportunities for you to find a way in sports that can develop your confidence, your leadership skills, your resilience, your perseverance. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how you actually perform on the field. It has to do with the skills that you develop being a part of the team and a part of the game.
That is a key concept because there is certainly a misnomer that it's about how you perform. That's all sports is about. It's about how you perform. And there are so many other qualities that come along with a good athlete or someone that is engaged in sports. So thank you for drawing that out. Many of the things that Erin has spoken about thus far, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into with our panel. But Erin, thank you so much for coming with this presentation. And we want to take a quick pivot while we're staying on this philosophy, this thought, this deeper dive into girls in sports and the psychological component. And we want to draw back in our second speaker who has been along this journey with us in the series, illuminating the mental health challenges that are brought on by inequity and stress, and providing us with techniques and coping mechanisms to combat these challenges. So with us this evening, again, we have Dr. Regina Wilson. Dr. Wilson completed her master's degree and doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Connecticut. She has been licensed by the state of Connecticut since 2000. Dr. Wilson has been in private practice for the past 21 years, but she has over 28 years of clinical work experience. In her professional career, Dr. Wilson has worked in a variety of settings, including child guidance and inpatient and outpatient psychiatric facilities. She has also provided clinical and administrative supervision for clinical graduate students at the University of Connecticut Department of Psychology and Mental Health Clinic. Dr. Wilson uses an integrative, dynamic, and holistic approach to partner with her clients to meet their therapeutic goals. Dr. Wilson is well-versed in evidence-based treatment modalities, including but not limited to trauma-informed treatment approaches, cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused psychoeducation, behavioral modification, and dialectic behavioral therapy. Dr. Wilson is also a board member and vice president of the Connecticut BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color, Mental Health and Wellness Initiatives, where she has conducted numerous psychoeducational and healing forums for the BIPOC community. Dr. Wilson, thank you for joining us once again and taking us into that deeper dive into the psychology and the challenges that are facing girls in sports. Dr. Wilson, you need to unmute. I was looking, saying, is she there?
Yeah, I was trying to find it. Sorry about that. Good evening, and thank you for having me again for our final discussion, Girls in Sports. So, I always start out with kind of like want to do a little clarifying what mental health is. Because a lot of times when we talk about mental health, people want to think I'm crazy, I'm going to be hospitalized. And when we say mental health, we're just referring to the mind. The mind is mental. And when you have a particular mental health issue going on, your mind isn't working as well as it should. So it affects how we think, how we behave, how we act. And then in turn, it affects how we handle stress and how we cope with things. In the midst of these talks, we learned about, especially in the athletic arena, there's a lot of stigma associated with mental health because, you're taught to be strong, not to be vulnerable. And so when it comes time to go to seek help, you're less apt to do so because you're afraid of how you're going to be perceived. But Simone, I think you guys, I missed the beginning, but, I think Simone was very brave when she acknowledged that, I need some help. So we need to start addressing mental health issues in the sports arena, because if you don't address it, which we've learned from a couple of speakers, is that it's going to show itself somewhere. So for example, I like to use the example of saying, let's say you're very, very stressed. Now you can either go talk to someone, use your coping skills, or it's going to physically manifest in his body. You might start having panic attacks. You might start having heart issues. You might get headaches, where if you had addressed what was stressing you, it wouldn't have turned into a physical manifestation. And lastly, when we're talking about like children or adolescents, playing sports should be fun for them. When you look at the disorders in youth, and these numbers are, I think it's not just female athletes, it's just youth in general. So you see that, and I would suspect that these numbers are elevated, especially for eating disorders. I believe the statistic for women are at 50 to 80% risk for developing an eating disorder over their lifetime. You have anxiety disorders at 32%, which we also know during the pandemic, we've seen a significant increase in depression and anxiety disorders. And then attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so this is exactly what I was just talking about, is when we're stressed and we're not coping well, it's going to manifest itself in different areas of our body. And I'm just going to cover a few. So like, for example, in your body, you could be having headaches, fatigue, skin irritations. In the mind, you know, you're worrying, you're having sleeping difficulties, your judgment is impaired. Behavior. Now you could be more accident prone, which is, you know, if you're in sports, that's, you know, something key, because now you're not able to play something that you love and have been enjoying doing. You also can see behaviorally a loss of appetite. Emotionally, irritability, depression, alienation, feelings of apprehensiveness where you kind of don't want to do things, not feeling uncertain about how to do things. So when we look at specifically, anything under 18 is considered a child. So that no disregard to the adolescents, but so symptoms in children. Symptoms are similar in adults, but I think it's also important to recognize that they're not the same. Like, you know, you're feeling of sadness, hopeless, irritability. Their sadness would not necessarily be, it would be more like, you're not going to maybe see cheerfulness. You might just see more of them kind of moping, you know, withdrawn, not wanting to do or enjoy fun things, showing changes in their eating. And again, you might be eating too much or eating less. Changes in sleep, hypersomnia or insomnia. You're sleeping too much or not enough. Energy levels, you just either, you know, you're just feeling really more tired, more sluggish or restless, like you got a lot of nervous energy. Difficulty paying attention, feelings of worthlessness, uselessness or guilt, and showing self-injurious or self-destructive behavior. What are some symptoms of anxiety we might see in children? Being afraid when away from the parents. Typically, separation anxiety does occur when a baby is like from 9 months to about 17 months, and they kind of outgrow that piece there. Sometimes when kids are experiencing a lot of anxiety, there may be fears about being separate from the parent. They might have phobias, like which would be like an extreme fear about something, like I really don't want to go to school today, or, you know, as I said, being afraid of school or other places. Being very worried about the future and bad things happening to themselves or to their family, to people that are close to them. And then having repeated episodes of intense fear that where you can have like difficulty breathing, your heart is pounding, shaky, sweaty, dizzy. These are things that kind of pay attention for. So what are the mental health issues that might be associated with girls in sports? You know, Miss Pellegrino had mentioned a couple of them. But you also see, because even with like, when I was reading on this, kids playing sports today is different than when we play sports. It's no more like, you know, just going outside playing with friends or maybe the intramural. It's really on a competitive nature. And so you see between the like the constant competition, the training and injuries, you know, more likely to have increased mental health issues of anxiety and depression or burnout from this schedule. Then you have fears of not living up to one's potential or others' expectations, which then again lead to decreased self-esteem or self-confidence. Body image. So there's two components that, you know, as Ms. Pellegrino mentioned earlier, one is this whole idea of how women are more objectified with the outfits they have to wear, right? And then the other piece is the myth around body and diet, you know, trying to have that perfect body. So you're working out like crazy, trying to be this thin, and this is more characteristic of like, I think running, gymnasts, you know, you see it in the tennis arena, this whole idea of what the female body is supposed to look like and not it to be over masculinized. And so you have them restricting their diets. And so now when your diet is restricted, it starts affecting your mind, because now you're not giving it the certain chemicals that it needs. And, you know, two chemicals that are very important, a chemical that's very important in the mind is serotonin. And if you're not getting enough serotonin, that's going to affect your mood. You know, that's why when you exercise also, it releases more serotonin and more endorphin, and it gives you this feeling of this, you know, happiness. But if you're not getting proper nutrition, and you're not going to have these neurotransmitters, or what we call chemicals, in the brain. Eating disorders, which, you know, is tied into the same thing of the body image. Again, female athletes are 50 to 80% more likely at risk of developing eating disorder. And again, trying to have this image that is being perpetuated by society. Coaches also are dispelling the same myth of this ideal body to these female athletes. So we have to shift the narrative of what is the ideal female body. Because if you look at Serena, right? Serena Williams does not look like the stereotypical tennis player, right? She looks more powerful, and she's always called out on her power, always not viewed as being feminine. But if we shift the narrative, and like, there isn't a specific body type for sports, for a female in sports. She has to have more self-acceptance, and we have to have more self-awareness around these negative image or negative views that we're telling to these children. And I think that's also tied into what Erin was saying about role modeling. So when we are talking to, the more we have more female athletes that are mentoring and working with the kids, I think the more they get to see that there is a gamut or a range of different type of athletes out there. And the last one, which is, you know, kind of uncomfortable to talk about, but I think it's important, especially, you know, given that story that came out on the doctor in gymnastics who had for years been victimizing children. And I think it's important that parents, you know, you entrust your child to this person, and that's good. But I think before you send your child, like I do, sexual abuse is my passion. That's what I used to do for many, many years, work with children who've been victimized. And I would tell my parents is talk to your kids about this. As soon as your child gets language, you want to tell them the correct terminology, because you can't, like I had one time someone said, a little girl said, my dad ate my cookie. And cooking, well, did he eat a cookie or was he inappropriate? And it's hard to tell. You want to give the correct terminology. You want to explain who should be touching them. Like when they go to the doctor should only be touching you if you're going there for this issue. If anyone is touching to come to you, you want to foster that trust and that communication in the child. I think in the sports arena, it's something happened where, like, I mean, you know, you want to be in this sport so bad because this has been going on for years. And so you're willing to sacrifice because you want to play the sport, but also the secrecy. In society in general, we don't talk about sexual abuse. It's still a big stigma around it. And I think that's the other piece. We have to talk more about it. We have to talk to our children about it. We have to encourage them to get help if they need it, because the long-term effects of being victimized is, you know, you end up in trauma, unhealthy relationships, low self-esteem. We know it's tied into substance use. So I think we, as coaches, as parents, as allies, need to make sure children are able to speak about this and not feel bad for telling on someone who's doing this to them. What are the benefits, though, of mental health? What are the mental health benefits of sports? And again, this was talked about earlier. We see improved self-esteem, you know, good social and interpersonal skills because of team playing effect. You have a sense of community or connectedness, supportive adults, the role modeling, the networking. It teaches you self-discipline. We also know that students who play sports from grade 8 to 12 have less stress and mental health issues as young adults. I talked about this earlier about how exercise decreases depressive symptomology because you have an increase in the chemicals in the brain. And the last thing is provides opportunities for learning adaptive coping skills, like frustration tolerance, dealing with losing, figuring out how to manage your anxiety or stress as you're coming forward with a competition. And again, these are components when we talk about managing mental health issues, things that you can do to help yourself. And I'll just cover a few, like physical self-care, nutrition, exercise, making sure you're getting enough water intake, spiritual and self-care, meditation. There are actually, and I wish I had my book, I have a little children's book that actually have little meditations that are tailored to their language and short for them. Prayer, people support, being able to have that network of support. For kids, again, it's parents being, having that relationship with your child so that they will come to you. Sometimes it means maybe there's a teacher who they feel comfortable with. Mental health and emotional self-care. Again, positive self-talk, mood journaling. Sometimes you may have to seek out professional help, a psychotherapist, and then lifestyle. So lifestyle for kids is making sure you're giving them time to play. Sports, the idea behind it when you're first playing is supposed to be fun. So make sure they're having stuff maybe outside of sports. They can use relaxation skills, just anything playing for them, because that is their nature of what they do. And so strategies for developing a self-planned care for you. So it's important to have a balance between the academics, social obligation, and sports. Teach them, as was mentioned earlier, it's not about winning, it's really about playing and skill development, not who wins first. Paying attention to whether the sport is still fun for them. Parents and coach need to create an atmosphere where the youth feel comfortable expressing themselves. Because, as I think one of the statistics I saw is that, and as Erin has said, females tend to drop out of sports in adolescence. Do fun things, spend time with friends outside of their respective sports, exercise, get adequate sleep and rest, utilize relaxation techniques to decrease body tension and manage stress, and then setting realistic goals related to athletic abilities and pursuit of professional careers. And so some techniques that can be used to manage stress and depression is, I did this one early, breathing deeply and visualizing a safe, calm space, or a happy place, I like to call it. Drawing, reading, doing yoga, positive affirmations, especially when you have a lot of negative self-talk, to shut the inner critic down. Journaling, making a collage of favorite things or how you're feeling. When feeling stressed, counting backwards from 10 slowly, 10. And you breathe in between 9, 8. And by the time you get down, you'll be calm or going for a walk. A technique I wanted to talk about today is called grounding, a grounding exercise. So you can, when you're feeling yourself starting to get anxious or feeling overwhelmed, you can ground yourself. So literally, you guys can do this in your head. So I literally would say it's called a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Because sometimes when you're in what DBT likes to call emotional mind, it's really hard to think rationally or clearly. So what grounding does is help you get centered, so then you can get back in and refocus on what you need to focus on. So you might be like, okay, I'll say, okay, touch your clothing, feel what you're wearing. Like I got a pair of jeans on. They feel soft. And my shirt, and then my shirt is soft, it's cotton. I can feel myself sitting in a chair. So I'm connecting to something physical, things that are physical. And then you do sight. Well, what do you see around you? I see my laptop. I see all these beautiful, powerful women in front of me. I see a candle over there. Hearing, what do you hear? It's quiet, it's pretty quiet here. I'm not hearing anything. What do you taste? I wish I had some water because I got dry mouth, but So like, let's say you drink something refreshing, like, oh, I can taste the peach in here or the lemon. You know, you're trying to identify the flavor and smell. Well, what do you smell? Oh, I lit an incense earlier, Palo Santo, so it smells very sweet and calming in here. And then after you do that, you got the person recentered back. Their anxiety would be down. In between there, I would probably have them taking some deep breaths, because you can't breathe slowly and be anxious at the same time. So thank you.
Dr. Wilson, thank you. This certainly has been a full exploration, much needed exploration of when it comes to girls, not just the challenges, but also the benefits, also some of the scary things that we need to look out for, and also some of the helpful tools that we can use as adults with children that can ground both of us. I'll say that for someone raising kids, things that can ground both the individual that's participating and the child that is working in that space. And you also touched on something that was really important to me as well, that while we've been in this conversation exploring the reasons why women participate in sports and the inequities that they face, that for girls, it's all about the game. It's not about a whole lot of other stuff. It's all about the game and how to keep it a space that is fun and rewarding and all about the game as they grow in this experience. So thank you. Dr. Wilson will be sticking with us as we jump into our panel conversation and plucking out some important nuggets that need to be drawn out further. So let's jump into our panel. With us this evening, we have Dee Stefan. Dee has worked in athletics all her adult life. She is the current owner of Dodgers, which she co-founded in 2000. Previously, Dee held athletic director and head coach positions at both Canton High and Middle School and the Ethel Walker School, successfully leading Canton's girls lacrosse team to their first state tournament and leading Ethel Walker girls to 2 Class C titles and 5 consecutive league titles. Currently, Dee is the head coach of the Eastern Connecticut State University women's team. As founding member and coach of the Avon Youth Lacrosse Program for over 20 years, Dee continues to volunteer and serve on their board. Additionally, coaching experiences include the University of St. Joseph, assistant field hockey coach at Syracuse University, a youth league coach since 1993, and coach of the U.S. Lacrosse National Tournament for the past 6 years. Beyond lacrosse, she has coached basketball and field hockey and played field hockey at the University of Connecticut and Southern Connecticut State University. Dee, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Awesome, thank you. Our next panelist is Melita Arms. Melita Arms provides equine assisted psychotherapy at Ebony Horsewomen, where she supports individuals that have endured severe levels of trauma and other symptoms, providing trauma-informed care to individuals in the Hartford community, where she also resides. Arms obtained her master's in social work from the University of St. Joseph and has been riding horses for all of her life. Melita, thank you for joining us. Look forward to diving into this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, we have with us Nicole Porter. Nicole Porter is the principal and founder of Access Sport, aimed to help underrepresented groups in underserved communities. Access to Sport is a social justice consulting enterprise focused on delivering equitable sports access solutions for education and community-based organizations. Ms. Porter recently served as District Operations Manager for Athletics for Hartford Public Schools, where she led operations for athletic programs serving 8 high schools within the city and more than 130 sports teams, supporting more than 2,000 student athletes. While there, she also launched nearly 30 new programs, including pilot and feeder programs to support growth of girls, youth, and high school athletics that yielded 5% YOY growth and engagement. Prior to her role at Hartford Public Schools, Ms. Porter worked as a program manager for the, excuse me, for the Greater Hartford YMCA, where she developed after school and summer programs to support youth engagement through fitness. Excuse me. Ms. Porter is a former Division I student athlete and earned a bachelor's degree in marketing and international business from Temple University and a master's degree in sports management from Columbia University. Ms. Porter, so glad to have you with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And hello to the esteemed panel.
Awesome. Now that everyone is here, let's jump into it. I know you all have been taking in the information that's been coming along thus far from videos, from our guest speaker, from Dr. Wilson, and now it's time to jump in. So one of the things that has come up in tonight's conversation are really the benefits of participating in sports at a young age. And actually, the Peterson Institute for International Economics found that girls who play sports do better in school, suffer fewer health problems, achieve more in areas dominated by men, such as science, and hold better jobs as adults. So the question that we have at hand is, what kind of benefits, what can benefits like with these kinds of benefits be attributed to when it comes to participation of girls in sports? What can benefits like these be attributed to when it comes to girls in sports? In other words, what is it that they're really getting out that allows them to succeed this phenomenally in all of these spaces? What are your thoughts? Let's start with Nicole.
Just from the top, it would be self-esteem. Just knowing that they can do it. Aaron and Regina touched on the subject that sometimes you can't be what you can't see, right? Mm-hmm. So when children, especially girls, are put in situations where they're given opportunities to play sports, they have supportive coaches, supportive parents that are telling them that they can do it, it builds their self-esteem. It lets them know that they can do this, and if they can do or conquer something that's hard in that particular sport, that mindset is transferable to anything in life. Mm-hmm. And I think almost anyone who has participated in sports, whether man or woman, but especially a girl, if you've done something very hard in any particular sport, you can transfer it to any, adversity you may face later on down the road in life. So, self-esteem is definitely one big thing that's up there.
That's an excellent point. Those transferable skills that are
that's
developed. Right. Dee, what are your thoughts when it comes to why girls succeed in these areas so phenomenally as a result of participating in sports?
Athletics is unique in the fact that you're almost expected to fail sometimes, and the ability to overcome and learn a skill and perfect a skill and be able to master that and then build upon it and move on, I think gives that self-confidence to know that, hey, I did this before. I was able to accomplish this. I couldn't kick a soccer ball, 50 yards before. Now I can. That's going to transfer into the challenges we face in everyday life, regardless of what our job or career choice and path may be. So I agree. It's the self-confidence that's built from the accomplishment of skills over time that really, athletics is the only way you could do that. It doesn't really happen in any other arena. So that's why I really believe sport is so important for girls, because it gives them an opportunity to learn skills and build upon them.
Yeah, that's an important point that you drew out, that children aren't exposed to many arenas, really. They go home, they go to school, they go home, they go to school. And so having this other space where there's another way to engage other than what they perform at home and what they perform in school, that's definitely something to take into consideration. Thank you. Now, Melita, you provide psychotherapy supports in a very interesting space when it comes to horses. And for many years, many individuals didn't think that the equestrian sport or the jockeying sport was a space for women, let alone girls. So what have you observed as the benefits for girls participating in that particular sport?
Well, I think for me, what I've observed is the internal challenge of overcoming the emotions that they have internally, like be it fears or anxieties or moments of angst because of their thoughts. The horse, the engagement with the horse actually provides them a sense of calming. It's used as a soothing component to get them to where they need to be, internally as well as externally. And I feel the same way about sports. I think girls in sports, I think, you know, accepting the challenge within yourself. Like, can I really do this? Can I do this? Yes, I can do this. And with the appropriate support, as everyone has said, as I'm echoing, with the appropriate support, the healthy supports, the staff supporting, the proper attention provided, girls can be successful in many arenas. But in this equestrian arena, on the dressage team, when the young girls are there, they're prideful. They make sure their outfits are, you know, they're very prideful on how they look, how they appear. They make sure their horse is clean. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see. And a lot of the individuals that are engaged at Ebony Horsewomen are inner city individuals, and some come from outer areas for therapy, but a lot of the young women that are on the dressage team are inner city girls where they could be doing something else, but they are committed and dedicated to the equestrian piece of this.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, while we were going through these sessions and considering who to really do outreach to and invite to the panel, we plucked on Ebony Horsewomen for two reasons. One, the uniqueness of the services you all provide, and two, the fact that when we consider the arena of sports, the equestrian sport is one where there's interaction with another living creature versus interaction with either sports material or just other teammates. Here is the interaction with another individual for the sake of competition, another creature for the sake of competition. So that concept that you bring in of the emotional outlet that's there, and the need for them to take pride in their appearance and that of the animal that they're working with, that's definitely a concept that marks that sport very differently. And so we wanted to make sure that we are also sharing with our audiences unique opportunities that they might not be considering when it comes to thinking about the whole scope of sports that children have the opportunity to choose from.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, the other concept that came up in our conversation thus far, and we touched on it just briefly when it came to Aaron speaking about uniforms or whatever the athlete is wearing, is body image. So on developing positive body image, Simone Biles, Olympic gymnast, said, "It's hard growing up in a sport where you compete with very little clothing on your body, and everyone is staring at your body, no matter how good you are. No matter how good you are at the sport, people will always say you don't look good enough." Biles wrote this in her memoir, which came out in November 2016. She said, "But we wouldn't be able to do the things or achieve the things we did without our bodies. So we're very grateful for them." So what are the challenges to developing positive self-image while your physical development and performance are on public display? What are some of the challenges that our girls are facing while their physical image is on display?
You know,
Thoughts to this?
in this day and age, you know, our girls, even women, are inundated with images that they see on social media, on television, to be a certain way, act a certain way. And when they don't have that particular aesthetic, it can be hard on them. I mean, we can all relate to a point in our life when we didn't feel adequate as an adolescent, or even as women in general. And I think for these young girls, it's amplified because of the social media and the many computers that they have in their pockets. So, you know, again, it's just making sure, you know, Dr. Regina Wilson touched on this earlier, just having positive self-affirmations and knowing who you are. And for a child, I think that can be difficult, even for adults, right? But just knowing who you are and being reminded of that, having, supportive parents or a supportive adult remind girls who they are, so that when they are going to be judged, because judgment will happen on their bodies, that they know within themselves that they are who they are and they're comfortable with who they are. But more importantly, if they are being faced with, judgment from their coaches, parents or teams, making sure that they are being protected and they are safe, advocating for themselves, and making sure that there are responsible adults around them advocating for them as well.
Additional thoughts?
I agree. I would like to introduce, due to the equine with the horse will let them know when they're not moving or they're not appropriate. The animal will let these young girls know, like, you need to get yourself together, because we're not in sync. We're not in sync. And if the horse if they're not in sync on a dressage, on a run, at a parade or what have you, if they're out of sync, the horse isn't going to perform as it should, because the individual on the horse is out of sync. So just trying to be in, get in touch with yourself. And like Aaron mentioned, like role models, these young women at Ebony Horsewomen, they role model for each other. They pull each other up on things. They encourage each other. And it's required to be at Ebony Horsewomen. Mrs. Kelly requires it. And not just for the young women, but for the young adults that are there. It is a very positive environment for young adults. And it's, you have the phones, you have the electronics, you have the deceptiveness at that age of sneaking off and, trying to, and it's all captured and it's all addressed, because if this is something you start here, it may go somewhere else. So a lot of things are addressed at Ebony Horsewomen, and the dressage team as a whole, they collectively, they encourage and help each other. And it's good to see, as when you're talking about judgment, because it's healthy. There's healthy judgment and there's negative judgment components. But this is what I experienced at Ebony Horsewomen as well.
So Nicole, you spoke to the importance of really making sure that youth have the strength within them to stand regardless of where they're on display. Melita, you spoke to the importance of youth understanding that if they're not in sync with themselves, how can they then be in sync in their performance? Correct. But Dee, I wanna ask you, when it comes to, because you've played multiple roles, whether playing on a team, coaching a team, you've played so many roles. When it comes to youth and body image, as a guardian, in that guardian position, whether it's a coach or parent, whatever have you, in that guardian position, how do you know what to look for if a youth is in trouble as far as their body image goes? If someone is in peril, if a youth is considering or tinkering on behaviors that are unhealthy, how do you know what to look for?
I think it helps when you have multiple adults working with children. As an administrator of Avon Youth Lacrosse, going back to that body image, it's important that their uniforms are chosen and selected and purchased so they fit properly. Athletes come in all sizes and shapes, and athletes of all different sizes and shapes can be very successful in many, many different ways. And I think having children who come to a sport in a variety of shapes, they must be given an opportunity to wear a uniform, which is so important to young girls, that fits properly. And that does not put their body on display in an inappropriate way. But it also requires the adults. I've found myself many times saying, I think we might move better, be stronger, be able to perform better if we wore a larger size of kilt, or if you wear something if you're uncomfortable with the racerback style, put a t-shirt on underneath. That doesn't take away from what you're doing. So I think you have to have those conversations when a child is in trouble and you could see the signs of that. You need to have a very frank, hard conversation. You also need to include the guardians, the parent, the guardian. You need to share with them, hey, I've noticed Susie's really, looking thin, and she's losing her strength and stamina. I always bring it back to the girls about proper fueling of their body. I always use the analogy of your body is like a car. You can't drive a car till it runs out of gas. You can't play a sport or be successful on the field, in the pool, on the court, anywhere, if you don't have enough fuel in your body. So I think it's important to help educate them that it's okay to eat. It's okay to feel strong. It's okay to be of a different size, that we all have talents. But when they are in trouble, I think you have to have those hard conversations, but always looping in the guardian and parents. Because sometimes we can't see it right in front of us when we see our child every day.
You brought up something important that I want to put a pin in, and we'll go right back to when it comes to uniforms. But this concept of it takes a village, and it's not just the one person looking at a child, but it's bringing in all those voices that are in care, are in guardianship of that child, and also being able to name specifically what you see. And it takes a bit of courage to do that, because to see a child in peril is really distressing. Let's be honest, that draws on anyone's heart. And to have to courageously name out what it is that you're saying and seeing, and be able to bring in that circle of care is essential in wrapping around that child and giving them the opportunity for success. Want to bounce back to uniforms. That is definitely a conversation worth having. So let's have a dialogue really quickly about, in general, when it comes to participation in sports, there are barriers to uniforms in a lot of ways, whether it's the kind of body that you have, whether it's the income that you have, and what kind of team you're on. I just want to hear from our panelists, what have been your experiences when it comes to youth in sports, especially our girls in sports, and uniforms? What have those challenges looked like?
Oh boy. Just, kind of dovetailing from the body image standpoint. And, Dee, you touched on it earlier. I think we do need to be, especially as women, more just in the know in terms of what our girls are wearing. We have young girls who are developing, some are more developed than others, and making sure that they are wearing the appropriate uniform. Now, we do know that there are some sports where, you are, pretty much fully clothed, or, your basketball, tank top is okay and your shorts are okay. But then you have sports like volleyball or track and field, gymnastics, swimming, where, uniforms are, a little bit more skin is showing, right? By nature of making sure that there isn't too much clothing that would bear you from having a great performance. Again, just being aware of our children's body shape and size. I'll speak to an experience where I went into a gymnasium and I saw a group of girls practicing for volleyball. And I noticed that their uniforms were ill-fitted. And I had a conversation with the coach and asked them to purchase new uniforms because their shorts were too short. Now, maybe on different body types, the shorts would be okay, but on the body types of these young girls, they were not appropriate. So sometimes it's just having that additional lens and making sure that there's another person in the room seeing this And I also wanted to draw attention to some of the girls. And we had a conversation about what they had on. Some of them were very comfortable with what they had on, and that's okay. But I had a conversation with the girls, being that they are girls of color, young Black and Latino girls that were on the team. We had to talk about what that image looks like outside of you. You are welcome to wear what you need, but when you're wear what you want, but when you're representing your school, yourself, you want to make sure that you're dressed appropriately, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable. And that you are not going to be judged on what you're wearing, but your performance on that court. So, you know, that's just one aspect of it. You know, another aspect of, especially within urban communities that don't have a lot of funding, is the lack of funding for uniforms. It can make and break sometimes your performance or self-esteem. And honestly, sometimes one of the reasons why our kids quit, because they say, oh, we don't have the uniforms, we don't look like them, we can't play as good as them, when, you know, sometimes it's just a mental barrier. But, you know, there is some, you know, truth to that adage, you know, about you looking good and feeling good, you know, and that's transferable onto the field as well. So, you know, those are some of the, you know, sometimes issues that can be corrected through funding and an additional lens to make sure that our girls are looking good and feeling good. And more importantly, we're protecting them when they're wearing their uniforms.
I think that's really hard too in school settings where you're buying uniforms. As a former athletic director, where you have to buy uniforms that are going to last 5 years. You may have a certain body type right now in your program for that particular sport. Well, next year it could be a totally different body type. So when funds are limited, regardless of situation, if you're trying to buy uniforms for 5 years, you don't know what the body types are going to be. You have to make sure that you take into consideration that the female body can be very different for different people. And I think sometimes female athletic directors are more aware of that than our male counterparts. It's easy for male high school students who don't have, maybe they have a height difference or broader shoulders on the males, but there's so many factors in fitting a female athlete properly, comfortably, so that they feel good when they take the court or step on the field.
Additionally, I wanted to draw attention to another quote from Serena Williams. And those of you that haven't had the pleasure yet, there is a film out. It is not a biography, but it is biography. It's kind of a biography, I don't know. But it is entitled King Richard. And it is envisioning their father and their journey, Serena and Venus Williams' journey to stardom. And Serena Williams says, I love my body and I would never change anything about it. Williams told Self in August 2016, I'm not asking you to like my body. I'm just asking you to let me be. Because I'm going to influence a girl who does look like me, and I want her to feel good about herself. So when it comes to that feeling of feeling good about herself, what can parents do, and what can parents and other supporters in a young athlete's life do to support that positive body image?
I believe having a conversation first about with your child, with a particular sport they're wanting to engage in. I'll just share a little bit. I have an 11-year-old granddaughter, and she just played soccer. And my son made it very clear that her shorts had to be a certain length, because she's tall, she's long, she's thick. And I think, you know, asking about, you know, having a conversation with her about her comfort level of what, you know, how are you going to feel comfortable? Because everyone on the team did not have the same length. They didn't, you know, they had the same shirts, but some shorts were shorter, some shorts were tighter, some shorts were different. And I think having a conversation with the coach around that, like Dee mentioned, like Nicole mentioned, having a conversations about what's appropriate and what can be, you know, appropriate for young adults, Black and Brown or Latino, is important, because I think some uniforms can provide a mixed message to the individual. And that's something we really have to be mindful of. You know, I can go on about certain outfits, but we have to, you know, stay focused on the representation. And we, you know, we want them to be integrous about what they're wearing. We don't want them to compare themselves to, you know, movie stars or, you know, women who are half naked or whatever the image that they're attracted to when they are in these uniforms. So I think we have to be mindful of that, and communication is key.
I think something that we've been skirting around is that the uniforms themselves, the presence of a young girl athlete who is coming into their own development, that where we err on the side of caution is the sexualization of that child. And ultimately, there has been a history of reports of abuse of young athletes, young girl athletes, whether by their coach or someone else that has some kind of power dynamic within the sports realm. So when it comes to that form of protection, it is a community mission to be on alert and to be vigilant. But there are other challenges that girls in sports have. And so when it comes to the systemic crisis facing girls in sports, I do want to bring our attention to another quote by another female athlete. So Mary Cecilia Kane is an American professional middle distance runner from Bronxville, New York, who in 2013 became the youngest athlete to compete on a world championship team. Kane was a high school athlete competing alongside and beating professional women twice her age. And she was quoted stating, "I got caught in a system designed by and for men, which destroys the bodies of young girls." There is a systemic crisis in women's sports in which young girls' bodies are being ruined. We need more women in power. Part of me wonders if I'd worked with more female psychologists, coaches, and nutritionists, where I'd be today. When you hear remarks like this, what systemic challenges do we need to remedy for girls in sports today so they can succeed as champions tomorrow? What are your thoughts on that? What systemic challenges? She said, if I had female psychologists, coaches, and nutritionists, where would I be today? Thoughts on that? What are some of those systemic challenges that need to be addressed?
Ooh, this is a big question, because it's so multifaceted. As a former athletic administrator, Dee, I think you can attest to this, or women in the sports industry in general. Sometimes it tends to be an old boys network, right? And Erin, you mentioned something before about sports not being designed for girls, or with girls in mind. And that's from participation to, administration, different facets of the business. From a systemic standpoint, I think looking at how, I think we've come a long way, right? So we mentioned Title IX, and we're approaching 50 years of that. I think we need to look at not only the reason why we have Title IX, sports participation is, the most visible aspect of that. But I do think we need to hold our policymakers accountable for making sure that we are enforcing Title IX, every aspect of it, from accommodations, making sure that our girls have opportunity and access to health and equity, benefits that come from playing sports. We need to look at how we are funding our school-sponsored activities. We need to look at how we are helping our parents advocate for some of, the sports or lack of sports in their schools. You know, I can go on and on, but I think those are just some of the barriers that, our girls are facing. Again, when we don't provide them with these opportunities to actually play, how can they be aware of different career options that would help, an athlete like Mary Kane, so that she would be in a better place. So again, sports participation and the barriers to sports participation, I think, in removing those barriers would help athletes like her be more successful, so that we have more women represented in different facets of the sports industry and sports participation.
I think something that's super crucial in changing this model. I grew up with all brothers, like some other people on the panel have said, but the biggest thing for me is when I first came into playing sports and athletics as the beginning of Title IX, I had all female coaches. Now, when I work with young athletes, sometimes when they get to me in high school or college, I'm their first female coach. That dynamic has hurt the ability for girls to see themselves being able to build careers in the athletic world. It's very difficult when you are playing field hockey and you have a male coach all through your youth program, all through your high school program, and you might not play in college, which is fine. I think, going to high school and playing is great, but why would you give back? Why would you become a coach if you've never seen another female coach? I think for myself, I was in my second year in college when I finally said, because I had a mentor, I finally found my voice to be able to say, I want to make athletics my career. Prior to that, I never thought it could be a career. And many of the young girls I work with don't realize they'll say to me, my 8-year-olds will say to me, oh, this is your full-time job? You do athletics, you coach? And I'm like, yes, women can coach, women can have children, women can. So I think that when they don't see us on the sidelines in the executive office of a, program or as athletic directors, it's very difficult to imagine yourself as a young person if you can't see someone who looks like you. And very often we have women in, running a youth program in a community. We have women who have played lacrosse in college who will not coach at the youth level because they're busy running their other children around. So it takes the ally of a partner or a spouse to be able to say, you go coach, I'll make the dinner, I'll pick up the other kids. And I think we need to ask that of our partners and spouses to do that for us so we can be the role models. We need more women coaching women and young girls. We need more women officiating our games. Most of my lacrosse games are officiated by males who have never played women's lacrosse. That is a problem. And systematically, we need to encourage more young people to get into those different aspects of sport.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Nicole. Melita, any thoughts on those systemic challenges?
The systemic challenges. I think I listen to the systemic challenges a lot, mostly every day. I'm married to a basketball coach. And we do talk about the challenges between men and women, be it basketball, football, soccer, what have you. And I think I think it's getting better for women. I think we have a ways to go. It's I did play sports, and I'm sitting here, once I got online with you all, I did play sports, but it was just to play. It wasn't proposed to me like, this is something you can actually do. Like today, it is today. You have coaches that invest in individuals much more than they did when I was in school. It was just kind of like, you just play, you just do your basketball, do your track and field, and you do the swim team. I swam all 4 strokes, but it was never given to me like, you can go to school for this. You can get a scholarship. You can do all kinds of things of that. That wasn't, those languages weren't spoken to me. And I had all male except one. I had a female gym teacher, but that wasn't the conversation. It wasn't the conversation then. So the systemic piece has to happen collectively. It has to happen across the board. Because if it happens just with D and the people she is engaged with and coaches, it has to be echoed. It has to be said through D. It has to be echoed through Nicole. It has to be echoed through Aaron. It has to, it's like a bell. Every time this individual goes somewhere, the child that's playing, they're saying, you can do this. You can make this. You can go to college for this. You can be a coach. You can be a mentor. You can do it, but it has to be echoed consistently, constantly. They have to hear that, because other than that, other things will get in their ear. That's my take on it. It has because there's so many challenges, Melinda, that we're up against with these young people. I mean, there's so many challenges. So we have to be louder. We have to be stronger. We have to be more powerful than the vices they're up against every day to break those systems, break into them.
Yeah. Yeah. And raise a generation that will break into them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not be afraid, and be courageous about, and be courageous about breaking them, and integrous and determined to break them. That's what has to happen. That's just my outlook on it.
Well, we thank all of our panelists.
I'm sorry,
Nicole.
No. I was just going to mention about there are systemic barriers, but I think also in particular for people of color, there are additional barriers as well that need to be addressed that really affect girls in sports participation. The fact that a lot of our girls of color don't participate until later on in life, while some of their white counterparts actually have an opportunity to participate earlier. So what happens is when you have, and it's evident in a lot of our communities, when you have sometimes urban school districts compete against predominantly white institutions, they're not as competitive because they didn't have that head start, if you will. So that's something else that's systemic. Sometimes it's tied to funding. Sometimes it's tied to racism. But I think those are some other things that we should address, in addition to making sure that we have women in different facets of the sports industry outside of the field or the court of the pool.
Right. And thank you for bringing that up, because when we talk about systems and addressing systemic inequity, systems are interactive, they're overlapped, they're layered, they're intersectional, and there is no way that you can address one without looking at the integration of the other. And so when you talk about urban students, particularly girls of color, Now you're looking at layers of poverty. Now you're looking at socioeconomic disadvantages. Now you're looking at zoning and why certain school districts or certain schools are built the way that they're built, and they don't have the fields and the other things that are needed. So this is one of those conversations that would run us down a rabbit hole of potential ways that we can really evolve this issue, particularly in the Hartford region where we're based, where this conversation is coming from. And we intend to run down those rabbit holes. It's our hopes that from here, next year, we will be having a follow-up conversation, and that we will that conversation will be followed by some action. I want to let you all know, as we thank our panelists for all that they have shared, that we have heard some really good stuff over the course of our 4 sessions. We have heard that mental health supports are insufficient on the college level when it comes to college athletes, and that is an important thing that needs to be remedied. We have heard that there are inequitable playing fields, physical playing fields, when it comes to girls in sports, and that is something that needs to be remedied. And today we are hearing more about the conversations around accountability amongst caretakers for athletes, in addition to the importance of looking at these overlayered and overlapping systemic issues that play a role in why girls in sports, particularly urban girls in sports, are integrated into sports at a later time in life. So there is a lot for us to chew on, and we are grateful for our panel on tonight, and Dee and Melita and Nicole. And before we close out, I want to lend the floor to Dr. Wilson to ask any additional questions or lend any additional thoughts that you may have.
Hi. Yeah, thank you so much again for having me here. And I just want to share my thoughts that I've taken. It's just a nice brief synopsis from the whole time. I mean, besides changing the patriarchal and the institutional racism, which is, across our society, the important things when it comes to mental health and females in sports is, one, we have to destigmatize it, right? We have to let them, it's okay to be weak. It's okay to say you having some type of issue going on. It's okay to share your fears. 2, as you were just mentioning, we do need to provide mental health specialists to teams on the collegiate level, on the professional level, and even in high schools, because there have been cutbacks of guidance counselors and social workers. We have to make sure that these people are accessible to these athletes. And then from the speakers, what I took is the first speaker, I think Linda said, be authentic and self-aware. And she also talked about, which was the gamut of all three speakers, was the networking, making connection with people, having the role modeling, right? We need to have, everyone has said today, girls are not used to seeing female role models in the sports arena. We need more females as coaches, as, I don't know, whatever else you guys do. My apologies. But we need more females in those positions so these girls can see it. My apologies, brain. And then allyship, right? We were saying, like, yes, we need more female coaches, but at the same time, we also need to educate male coaches, that girls are not boys, and they don't need to be trained the same way and talked to the same way. This is a female, right? Because just because as a therapist, I don't need to have been assaulted for you to understand it, right? You can teach me. I can have empathy about what you're going through. So we can also have allyship with male coaches who can then also work with the females. The other message was that Erin said today, which is I thought was really, really important, is change the narrative around how we talk to females and instilling early, empowering, encouraging messaging that tells girls they can do this, and not giving them the limitations. Well, because you're a girl, you can't go be a quarterback. Yeah, you can. We've seen it and we know it's happening. And so I think overall, I mean, mental health is important across the gamut for everybody, but we need to start paying attention to it with our female athletes. So.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, for that synopsis. And thank you all for participating with us in our Equity is in the Game, Women and Girls in Sports Listening Session series. You know, by this time in your experience, you may be thinking to yourself, boy, I have a lot more thoughts and a lot more questions. And we encourage you to share those thoughts and ask those questions by completing on our exit survey. So if you look in the chat, there's an exit survey that has been dropped down there. We encourage you to complete that and share with us your feedback on your experience and be with us on this journey. At the YWCA Hartford region, we're committed to our mission to eliminate racism and empower women. And we thank you for being a part of this experience with us. Till next time.